Scenes like this that make us think seriously about our livelihood and the vulnerability of our small island nations in the Pacific. With rising sea level, erosion of coastal areas, shortages of water and food, and greater risk to health, climate change continues to rear its ugly head around the globe, particularly in the Pacific region. Together with increased population pressure on the fragile islands, sea level rise is expected to produce extreme impacts over the next few decades. Some of these impacts can still be avoided through timely and effective intervention at the local and global levels. For the Cook Islands, how they respond to the impacts of climate change demands sacrifice by the people to protect their livelihood, culture, and traditional values.
We know for certain that it's real, it's happening. We see that in Kiribati and some parts of Fiji that are being inundated with, with the sea level rise. And if we look at the Cook Island situation, I think there are still some people that are consider the effect of climate change as a cyclic phenomenon.
The Cook Islands comprises 15 small islands scattered over 2 million square kilometers of the South Pacific Ocean. With a total land area of only 240 square kilometers, the islands are divided geographically into a northern and southern group. The northern group is described primarily as low coral atolls, while the southern group comprises 8 volcanic islands with low-lying coastal areas and raised coral islands. Like other countries lying in the tropical Pacific, the Cook Islands are subject to highly destructive cyclones, intense rainfall events, and devastating droughts. They are experiencing changes in their climate, such as higher temperatures, shifts in rainfall patterns, and rising sea levels, amongst other things. For many small island states like the Cook Islands, the impact of climate change and variability are already a reality.
I mean, in the last 10 years, perhaps sea level has increased here in Rarotonga, something like 10 millimeters in the last decade. And I think one of the problems that we're having here is because it's not as obvious as it is in some parts of the Pacific, such as Kiribati. And so perhaps this has caused people to not be so concerned about it here, the way I see it.
Cook Islands' life and culture are interdependent and related to land, ocean, and environment. As a small island's developing state with many low-lying atolls, science indicates the Cook Islands will be significantly impacted by climate change. While the world as a whole must seek to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, the Cook Islands must also implement significant adaptation efforts to respond to climate change. To address this, the Ministry of Health in the Cook Islands, in partnership with National Environment Service and police, has been running a successful adaptation program over the last few decades. The regular household Tutakap health program provides routine surveillance of potential mosquito breeding sites and ensures septic tanks are working correctly.
This program, Tutaka, or you may call it the cleaning campaign, is a program initiated by the Ministry of Health to inspect all properties in the country. That means if we have a Tutaka on Rarotonga, we expect the outer islands will be doing the same program with us. So therefore what we do is basically, one is the cleanliness and tidiness of the building, of the properties, and two is to see whether there is a mosquito, or may I say, or pest that is significant to public health. They have this and this.
Charlie Ave has been the man behind the cleanup campaign, a senior health inspector with the Ministry of Health who has been involved in the program for more than 20 years. Ave and his team of health inspectors help ensure that the campaign is planned and executed well.
Every household we visit, we give them notices. The notices include thanking them for looking after the properties. But if we have a health issue identified during this program, then we will give them a time frame to solve the problem. For example, if we found there's overflow septic tanks, then we give them some notices. 1 or 2 days, then we come back again and check whether this has been solved or been taken care of.
Climate change has been the subject of scientists' alarm since the 1970s and has become an issue of increasing concern for the people of the Cook Islands since signing the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in 1992. The El Nino phenomenon has raised awareness in the Cook Islands community of the potential effect of extreme weather variability on health and disease transmissions. El Nino has been linked to cyclic outbreaks of vector-borne diseases such as dengue fever, as well as other infectious diseases such as cholera.
The last couple of 10 years, we never experienced this heavy rain, flooding. But now you can see the climate is changing. So the Ministry of Health, in relation to that, I believe is the one can be in our situation, vector control people, is increase of dengue fever. So that's why we encourage people after every heavy flood, the raining, to make sure there is no possible breeding places around. You know, the cycle of mosquito, when it rains, then you expect high increase of mosquito within 14 days.
Hello.
There is growing concern about the adverse effects of climate change on human health in remote islands.
Woohoo!
For example, mosquitoes that carry diseases such as dengue will be impacted by changing rainfall and temperature patterns. Water and food safety will also be at risk with rising temperatures.
How's the back?
And the dangers posed by heat stress will likely target the very old and the very young in particular.
Bucket full of water. That's a potential breeding place for mosquitoes. As you can see, there's already mosquito larvae inside this bucket.
With around 15 health inspectors in Rarotonga alone, they are kept busy with visits to the outer islands to ensure a clean and healthy environment free of mosquito breeding grounds.
Ever since I started work, that's over 20 years now that I've been in the ministry, and since then the ministry have been holding tutaka every year, sometimes twice a year, but now we're doing it regular, more like 3 or 4 times a year now. So this year, this is the first tutaka for this year, and there's 3 more to come.
Like today, we found one that's the waste is overflow from the septic tanks. So that's no good. So we need to act on that as soon as possible.
At the moment, we are not sure because a few years back we didn't have septic tanks and we had toilets in the sea. But now that it's been advised not to have toilets in the sea anymore, and now we've got septic tanks, and those are contributing factors to the deterioration of the lagoon.
A number of Pacific Island countries, including the Cook Islands, show that women and their families and communities are experiencing hardships in their daily lives as a result of climate change impacts on agriculture, land availability, and water resources. Residents in Rarotonga have therefore welcomed the health campaign, saying it helps eliminate the resurgence of dengue fever and other tropical and waterborne diseases.
I think it's good. It motivates us to, to tidy up and clean up and sort things out like cans and bottles and that it should be taken away and not around the place because it's causing a lot of, the mosquitoes are really bad now. since the health boys are not doing the spraying anymore like they used to do about, maybe 10 years ago. I think it was the last time they did that.
It's a good program, and I'm glad we've had this program for more than 70 years. I think New Zealand introduced it in the 40s when we had the dengue fever. And since then, it has evolved into a conscience for the people to start cleaning, whether there is a tutaka or not. So you will find that people are cleaning their yard. It's part of the culture now, if I may use that word. It's part of the cleaning practices of the homes.
What's happening over in Fiji, Tonga and Samoa, it's going to happen over here. The climate change is going to happen over here. I mean, I know I can feel it.
Adaptation to climate change is very important and represents a no-regrets approach, which is particularly important in the outlying atoll islands. The government of the Cook Islands has increased its focus on addressing climate change, including national capacity building and awareness raising, and the establishment of the new Climate Change Office within the Office of the Prime Minister.
We were set up to coordinate the climate change functions across government. A lot of ministries, a lot of government departments are engaged in climate change activities. Climate change is a cross-cutting issue, and it was felt that climate change across government needed to be coordinated. We're not really an implementing body. We have the line ministries and the departments that will actually implement the projects. But what is really essential is to make sure that everybody knows about these different activities, because we don't want to duplicate activities, or we want to achieve synergies in our results. There's a lot of climate change projects out there now, and it is important that it is coordinated.
It's trying to make the link between climate change and our everyday lives, well, climate change and the impacts on the sectors in our everyday lives, like freshwater resources, agriculture, our coral reefs. It's been a challenge, but it's trying to make that connection, and that's how people understand climate change better. And then through our community and vulnerability adaptation assessments, we've managed to go out to the community to help them to identify their environmental risks and tailor their responses, because every island is different, every island has different needs, so tailoring their responses, because we know that climate change for small island developing states, climate change is really big. We know that it'll impact us negatively, but how much that will affect us is the challenge that we face here.
The Secretariat of the Pacific Community, SPC, is one of the many regional and international agencies working with Pacific Island countries and territories to help improve their understanding of climate change and thereby help them build resilience. Improved early warning systems for extreme weather events such as cyclones, floods and droughts may reduce vulnerability to future risks associated with climate variability and change. Local doctors are also aware that climate changes could lead to certain tropical diseases re-emerging as threats.
I think we've been quite good in that area. We do have cases that come in with diarrhea and things like that, but we really haven't, our lab doesn't have the facility to test the stool to see whether it's giardiasis or something like that.
In many Pacific Islands, communities are already beginning to observe changes in their natural environment, consistent with the types of changes international scientists say will occur with climate change. As environment is a key pillar to sustainable development, climate change poses a major threat to the country's development now and into the future.
Over the last several years, it's been really a real challenge for us to talk about climate change and its impacts on our environment here in the Cook Islands. particularly because climate change has a lot of science, scientific and technical jargon, and more so because, probably like many other countries in the Pacific and even in the world, when you can't see the evidence, it's really hard to get people to understand and to believe in it. For example, we talk about pollution and littering, and so we take them to see the rubbish, and you see it and it's visual, so it's really easy for us to encourage people to act. But with climate change, it's really hard for them to see evidence such as sea level rise and rising temperatures. One really good resource that we've used in the past for consultations as well as education to the schools is a resource like this, Climate Change in the Pacific. This book is really simple enough and it talks about climate change, the facts about climate change, and its impacts on different sectors of our community, for example, water resources, agriculture, fisheries, coastal resources and things like that. We've used this because it's in English, and we predominantly speak English here. But when we go out to our outer islands, we have to turn this into our national language, which is Māori, Cook Islands Māori. So what we did was we got some funding to develop the same resource into our Cook Islands language, not only translating the whole document into Cook Islands Māori, but making sure that examples from other parts of the Pacific were taken out and replaced with examples from here in the Cook Islands. And a good example of that is the impacts of climate change on our tourism industry and on our pearl industry, black pearl industry.
Climate change it has an impact on most things, really. It has an impact on our social life, it has an impact on our economy, it has an impact on our environment. So we can no longer look at climate change just being an environmental issue. Those other two thematic areas also have to be considered.
Climate change poses a real challenge to all Pacific Island states and is a major factor in the way we design development policies, address people's well-being, and construct our future. Thus, political will and regional collaboration in the Pacific Island region is critical in the fight against climate change. Climate change has emerged as one of the most important challenges of our time, because its impacts determine the way we live and survive in the future.
The fact that we have established a climate change office shows that this country is very serious about climate change, and by having this office, and especially in the office of the Prime Minister, it raises the the status of climate change in the Cook Islands, and I think that's a really good thing. And just to say that the Cook Islands is really concerned, and we're really serious about addressing climate change issues. And we don't want to point the finger and say it's your fault or your country's fault, but we also want to show the world that we can do something too.
Regardless of the arguments that are happening on the international stage, climate change is real. Disasters and emergencies are real. We need to work together to better manage these events. Now, to better manage these events, we need to know exactly what the threats are. First and foremost, know your threat. Once you know this, you can then better plan using the information you've gained.
You have to start with yourself. You have to, environmental education across the board is really what we need to consider when we're talking about climate change. Because if you go out there and talk about climate change as a topic on its own, people get, they get taken aback and they say, oh, no, this is too technical for me. So what we do here then is we make sure that we're linking it back to our everyday lives. Things like littering, things like overfishing in our lagoons, throwing rubbish into the streams or into the lagoons or onto the street, things like that, small things. If they can make small changes every day, then it contributes to a bigger response, bigger positive response for our country as a whole.
Climate change is a global concern, and in the Pacific Islands, our limited land size and resources, isolation and vulnerability to natural disasters exacerbate this threat. Small remote island nations such as the Cook Islands may in fact hold valuable lessons for the rest of the world as it tries to deal with changes to our planet's climate. For its part, the Cook Islands government is working at legislative, policy, sector and local levels to cope with the changing climate. And very possibly, it is very simple everyday actions like reducing the breeding grounds for mosquitoes that, when multiplied over and over, may hold the key to climate change adaptation.